Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be giving you my top 3 worst Tier 2 tanks in all of War Thunder. By tanks, I mean simply ground vehicles because, well, I'll go over that now. This list has gone through numerous different forms. At first, I thought this needs to be a 5 tank list, but I genuinely could not come up with 5 tanks. Then I thought, well, maybe I can add SPGs and tank destroyers, and then I came up with a list, but realized that they weren't all bad. And really, I almost had to include SPGs because there are so many in Tier 2. They make up a huge proportion of Tier 2 vehicles. Then I just said, okay, whatever the worst 3 Tier 2 ground vehicles are, that's what I'll make when I come up with this list. And here we have it, the ultimate iteration of that list. My top 3 picks for the worst ground vehicles of Rank 2. Bear in mind that all of my choices for this list are my opinion alone, and thus you might not only disagree with my list, but you might become so offended that you might start to projectile vomit. Those reactions are expected. Just don't take personal issue with this list. And let me know what you may have chosen instead of these vehicles in the comments below. I'm interested to hear your opinions. Additionally, if any of these clips make the vehicles seem better than they are, that's simply attributed to my experience versus most Tier 2 players. Regrettably, there are tons of seal clubbing deaths in this video, but I had to do it for the YouTube. Either way, please subscribe if you're not a Jive Turkey, and if you're a Radley Chad, but either way, let's get into the video. So for number 3 on this list, we have the M1542, and I give this 1.5 trash bags out of 5. While this is not an overtly terrible tank, as I admittedly have a tough time calling any vehicle in game bad or even ridiculous, the M1542 is not all too good for its BR. At 2.7 BR, it has lackluster armor, mediocre speed, and an iffy cannon. While not an overtly bad vehicle, this tank suffers a bit from having a little bit too high of a BR for what it offers. Again, being that I had a tough time saying that any one vehicle is bad, I simply found this one to be among the least good. Simply put, while you can do well with it, in some matches actually I do quite well because it does have a really good reload, ultimately at 2.7 BR this will be in a ton of up tiers, and its 69mm of armor pen at best will not do well for almost anything unless of course you catch your enemies in the flank or you just so happen to face another lower BR vehicle. This one is okay, but not all that good. For number 2, and crazy, right? We're already at number 2, but again, like I said, I couldn't really come up with a ton of vehicles, but I still felt like this video was actually worth making. So for number 2, we have the SAU-40. This is a French SPG, and I give it 4.5 trash bags filled with seafood out of 5. Now, as I said in my intro, the Tier 2 SPGs can be so bad that if I did not include them in this list, it would be a crime. The SAU-40 is no exception. It is slow, poorly armored, awkwardly designed, has a so-so cannon, though pretty decent, and is fairly large. All things that combine to make an abomination. As with my older videos that went over the worst tanks of Tier 1, it is clear that the French army had a ton of pre-World War II abominations, at least insofar as their performance in War Thunder is concerned. As with almost every other vehicle on this list, anyone can have their good games with the vehicles in this list, but I don't know if I've done anything more than survive to the end of a match in this vehicle more than maybe once or twice. Ultimately, while its cannon should at least make the SAU-40 decent, it is attached to an awful vehicle, and as such is dragged down. If you can't even get into a good firing position, what good is the cannon? You could throw a rock at this tank, and it would be about the same as firing an APF SDS at it. The SAU-40 is just not good, and although it looks like a duck, it is not nearly as good and will sink instead of swim. Also, if you shoot that MG turret at the top, which of course an MG turret, why not French designers? If you shoot that, that is a very easy way to kill a crew member because it is such a lightly armored, poorly placed MG turret right at the top of the vehicle, so even if you're behind cover, you will still be able to have a shot at it. It's just a very poorly designed vehicle, which fortunately has a good gun, but that good gun is the only thing that makes this thing actually decent in any one fight. And that's only in a few situations such as down tiers or if you're facing an enemy that just has no idea what they're doing. Before I get to number 1, I feel like it's worth mentioning a single honorable mention that did not make it to this list but almost kinda did. It's the SU-122. This is a Russian SPG, and the reason why I did not put it on this list is 1, because I wanted to make this more of a varied list, so I didn't want just SPGs in it, but 2, it also isn't all that bad, and you have a lot of people that will swear by this vehicle, and it has nowhere near the glaring flaws of the SAU-40, kind of the M1542, and much more so for my number 1 on this list. So while the SU-122 isn't all that great, in my opinion, it's not nearly the worst. Plus, again, I wanted some variety in this list and not just put SPGs. But that said, let's get to my number 1, and I'm sure some of you probably know what this is. The number 1 vehicle on this list features one of the strongest cannons in-game for its BR, a decent top speed, a great reload, and is fairly small, making it difficult to detect. So why are these features on this list and at number 1 of all places? Well, that's because I just described the Archer, an absolutely terrible vehicle in War Thunder. At least again, in my opinion. While some people might say Tankenstein, the cannon on the Archer is amazing. It doesn't deserve the top spot on this inglorious list. I would say, War Thunder community, the cannon is great, but it's attached to a turd wagon. If you can manage to get into position and sit there all game, it's amazing. It travels backwards from where the cannon is pointed, meaning that if you want to move in the direction of the cannon, you have to go in reverse, which inverts your controls and gives you a top speed of 3 or 4 kilometers per hour in RB. Even when moving forward, it is still fairly slow, not incredibly slow, but fairly slow and definitely unwieldy. Worse yet, it has hardly any armor and is open top, which leaves you hugely exposed to planes and MGs. Worse yet is that the turret traverse is incredibly small. This vehicle has been in War Thunder for as long as I can remember, and it's been awful for as long as I can remember. There were and still are far better options to add to the British Ground Forces tech tree than the Archer, so it amazes me that this wasn't added more recently, whereas the more iconic World War II vehicles, such as the B-26, were added more recently than, again, the Archer. Either way, this vehicle serves a purpose in real life, and was quite good in its role, but in War Thunder, the Archer is a big stinker, and thus earns not just regular trash bags, but 5 flaming dumpsters out of 5. So there's my list. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Of course, I wanted this list to be kind of funny, but realistically speaking, definitely the SAU-40 and the Archer are my 2 least favorite tanks, possibly in all of War Thunder, and they just so happen to be in Tier 2, and I really think that they are just awful vehicles, which is why they made this list. But again, I don't really think that there are many bad vehicles in War Thunder. It's kind of like when people say that you can't have a bad dog. It's much the same for vehicles in War Thunder. I don't really think that there's bad vehicles. There's some vehicles that need a BR decrease or BR increase, but overall, most are decent, but you have some vehicles that are just so incredibly difficult to balance because they have awful mobility, whereas other vehicles have tons of mobility in that same BR bracket, like the Archer and SAU-40, that it's just a crap fest whenever you use them. Either way, again, let me know in the comments below. Please like, comment, subscribe. I want your opinions on this video. What should I do next? But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.